Hello and welcome, my friend, to another episode of the Holy Human Podcast. A podcast devoted to those who live to bridge worlds. We dive into nuanced conversations about the full spectrum human experience. We explore the dance of polarity, the mystery of life, and God. This is a space where the mind and the body, the masculine and the feminine, the mystical and the practical, the holy and the human come together. My name is Felix Whitman. I'm your host, and I invite you to today's episode. Today I'm joined by Pilar Lesko, someone I've been wanting to interview and have a conversation with long before I started this podcast. She's been a teacher and mentor to me for years now. You don't come across people like her often. The way she lives and runs her business is quite unique and, to me, incredibly inspirational. So before we dive into this conversation, let me introduce her to you with a few words. Pilar has been immersed in a world of mysticism her entire life. The death of her mother at age 2 and subsequent karma-laden childhood cracked open her intuitive gifts, connection to the great mystery, and a trust that couldn't be broken. She has spent the last 15 years studying and training in energy work, psychic development, trauma integration, subtle plant medicine, and anything that helps her become more human. Her devotion to the subtle and relationship with creation has allowed her to experience and teach business and money in a different way. She's passionate about offering this work to those who are here to steward a new era of life-giving success and generative commerce. Pilar is the founder and steward of Eden, a virtual oasis for energy and self-mastery in life and business. She also offers occasional programs and one-on-one work. She makes but one promise with her work: to develop a deeper intimacy with life itself. So, my friend, without further ado, let's jump into the episode. Hi Pilar, welcome to the Holy Human Podcast.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Such an honor to have you here, to be speaking to you on this podcast and sharing your wisdom with my audience, with the lovely people listening. So, yeah, I want to dive into something that we just spoke about, which is bridging the mystical and the practical. And we've just dived into the topic of nervous system and weaving that into a grander spectrum. And I would like you to just start there, whatever comes up, whatever you feel like sharing right now.
Yeah, so I think, and I could kind of like land this in 100 different places, but this is the one that's first presenting. I think that from a vaster perspective, it can be kind of funny that we even have to have conversations like this where we're like, yeah, the nervous system is a part of the physical body and the energetic body and the conscious mind and the subconscious mind. Like, I've been having conversations recently with people where I'm like, it's funny that we're even needing to be reminded of this, but it makes sense if you look at kind of the wider timelines and like the wider story of humanity. We're coming out of a time very slowly where we've been very singularly focused of like, I am an I have a singular focus, I have a linear drive, I go step by step by step by step, and that's how I work, and that's how life works. The channel, Jane Roberts, who channeled Seth in, I think, the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, Seth called this the assembly line style of consciousness, where everything is this plus this plus this plus this to get to a certain outcome. And we've become overly dominant and overly reliant on this style, and you see it reflected in our inner landscapes, but you also see it reflected in the entire world and the way everything is set up. So a lot of people, especially I think in the worlds we traverse, are like, okay, so no more logic, no more linearity, it's all mystery, it's all nonlinear, it's all a spiral. And I disagree. I think that we're moving into a time where some of that is coming. It's not even that it's coming back in. We're remembering that our bodies, our nervous systems, and our auras are creative and inherently always operating in a creative, nonlinear style. But it's in the welcoming of that that we're able to actually fold in logic and linearity and x plus y equals z, rather than have it be this thing that we overly rely on and almost disassociate from the rest of our system in order to use it. But now it becomes something that's just another part of the intelligence of our systems. So in terms of the nervous system is both its own just massively intelligent and crazy system. Like it unto itself is it's such a crazy mystery to me, where like we know it but we also don't know parts of it, and it's continuing to reveal what it is to us. But then simultaneously it's interdependent with the rest of us, which is very similar to the human to human relationship, where I am this unique being that's continuing to reveal itself, but then simultaneously I find through that I'm interdependent with you, and that you revealing more of yourself impacts me. And we can't not impact each other because we arose interdependently. So I think that's what we're slowly moving towards. And I think that's why we have conversations like this, because we need to remember, and then we need to be reminded that this is happening.
That was a lot. I love everything you shared. I love how you're weaving the different layers of our existence. And well, it's really interesting to me, like in your work, how, I mean, I know you work a lot with the body as well, but also with the energy field and the aura and the multiple layers of our existence with the mind. And in my work, that's something that I'm really passionate about, is really bridging. And how do I frame this? It's so, like, we are so used, like you said, to dissecting things and then seeing the nervous system as, for example, now the holy grail. And then we see, because that's what we humans do, we see that the nervous system is sort of the thing that is going to save us. But then it's so isolated from the greater web that's where it's sort of woven into. It's like you can't view the human body, like the bones, separate from the muscles, the tendons, the tissues, the fascia. It's all working together, and then you have the animating forces, the blood, everything. And the same goes for the systems and the conversations we're having. It's like, okay, how can we have those conversations and remember that our system and we as humans are interdependent, how you called it, how we are weaving webs together? How can we sort of like individuate, and through that individuation, through that process, come into that greater web where we belong together and where we realize, oh, hey, we need each other. It's not just about me, because everything I do affects you or the whole world in a way, in some form of ripple. And so, yeah, I would love for you to just expand on, like, especially the point of like the nervous system and the aura and like the body and how they sort of work together and what your experience is in that?
Okay. So I've had a really interesting journey of going from very high up to to down, only to recognize that as I go down, I'm actually getting more congruent access to higher planes. So I'm starting it off by saying that because for me, the understanding that we have auras, that we have souls, that we're interconnected on a soul level, that the vibrational reality is the true reality. None of that was difficult for me to grasp. I felt like I hung out there exclusively and was like, this makes perfect sense. We're just all floating around. We're all connected in this like higher dimensional way. And so that part of it, it was easy for me to understand because I was experiencing it all the time, and some of what I was experiencing was driven by trauma and my response to it being disassociating and floating around and seeing visions and like hearing and just going like very exclusively running energy through my upper centers. So very early on, probably when I was like a teenager, I remember probably my late teens, early 20s, I remember being acutely aware of my disconnection from my body. And I remember also being acutely aware that talk therapy was not going to help with that for myriad reasons. And that was when I started researching the nervous system, and at the time, what were considered very alternative forms of therapy that were starting to come online. It's when I started like researching polyvagal theory and attachment trauma and all these different things. And I remember being like, this is what I need to start to bring more of my energy into my body. I need to work with these planes of existence. I need to work with my nervous system, my etheric planes, and my physical planes. I do not need to talk about what happened to me. I need at the time it was like I need bottom up therapies.
Yeah.
So as soon as I could start getting into those, like as soon as I had just a little bit of money, I wanted to go spend it on a bottom-up therapy. There was points where Chris and I had very little money, and we laugh about it now, but he's like, yeah, the option was groceries or you going to Network Spinal, or like groceries or you going and doing EMDR. And I was like wanting to choose the bottom-up therapies with the little money we had because I was like, this is the key. This is my key to get more energy in my body, which I knew at the time, if I don't do that, I can't move forward with why I'm here. Like I can't just keep being this disassociated kind of hyper upper chakra active person. So to make the next part shorter, every time I would engage with that work, because I was very psychically aware, I would immediately or not soon after understand the correspondence of what I had just done to the other layers of my aura. So I started to make these points of connection of like, when I do this, this is what happens in my aura. When I do this in energy work, now that I have more access to my body, I can actually move that energy into my body. So I never had to try and figure out that we're xylophones. I just started experiencing my system as one. So I could, every time there's nervous system work, I'm seeing that correspondence and how that vibrates through the whole system. And once I was getting more access from that perspective, now I could actually, in my energy work practice, start working with the nervous system and working with the body and seeing this. I just call it a xylophone because at every level we're changed, and we're usually only aware of some of those. But when we transform at every level, we're changed. And once you start to see that, you can't unsee it.
Mm-hmm. Wow. I really love what you shared here, and I think it's really beneficial for a lot of people listening. One of my clients that I'm working with, and a lot of people that come to me, especially like women, have this background of that you share as well, like being very up here, like super oracularly gifted, and there's so much energy up here, traveling in different dimensions, being able to speak to different beings, and all of that beauty. But what's missing, what's sort of the bottleneck, is the somatics, like the connection to the body. It's just constant living in dissociation, because those realms are much more beautiful, and I can relate myself as well, because in the past my entire goal was to like activate my psychic abilities, because I disliked this like realm. And so I want to like really bring some, like ask you about some very practical steps, in a way, where we like, how can we reconnect when we are so up here? How can we, or what can we do to, or what did you do in particular to come back in your body? Like, was it somatic therapy, or was it certain practices that you learned over time? I have my own approach, but I'm very, very curious about yours.
Yeah, so I'll say, I'll weave in what I did, but I've been supporting people in this long enough now to where I don't teach it the way I did it. I've kind of, I updated how I teach it, because we keep getting more access to things, and then how we
Right.
teach things change. So what the way I kind of work with this right now in 2024 is, we've reached a point where I think, especially in the worlds you and I are in, almost everyone knows. You even said, like, the nervous system is the holy grail. And there's this big awareness that people are like, oh my God, I'm not in my body. I need to be in my body. Oh my God, I need to heal my nervous system. Oh my God, I can't, like, and there's what I notice has started to happen over the last few years is people are learning the benefits of not being disassociated all the time. And then they're going, I'm like that. Something's wrong. I need to fix it. I need to fix this. And there's this idealizing of getting into the body and being out of it is wrong and something to get rid of. So the way I've started facilitating this, which is something I actually did without knowing I was doing it, is rather than being like, okay, let's get you in your body, I just start with, okay, so you feel disassociated, or you feel like you've kind of left a little bit. Rather than trying to change that, let's just make that okay. Let's just let that be okay. And why don't you take a moment and kind of track outside your body what it feels like to be disassociated? Where are you feeling your energy? Are you scared? Are you comfortable? Are you in the corner of the room? Are you above your head? And we kind of make, and for people who disassociate all the time, they're like, oh, I'm like behind my head. And no, I'm actually not scared. And I don't feel my lower body. And people are able to start naming what they're experiencing without making it wrong or bad. So then from there, it becomes, okay, so you're outside your body and you know what that feels like. Can we can we bring just a little bit of you down? And however someone comes down, I think is unique. That could be through breathing, that could be through a somatic practice, that could be through just a down regulating. That there's so many things that could happen there. I think there's a lot of ways to just kind of let your energy start to fall down and in. But what I found for people is one of the easiest ways for them to start to come a little bit more into their body is for them to realize it's not bad to be outside of my body. And this is a response or a strategy I picked up that kept me safe. And there's nothing bad about this strategy. So then let's say I work with people on this a lot. Let's say they bring some of their energy in and they're like, okay, I'm feeling a little bit more grounded, like I'm feeling a little bit more here. And then there's a stimulus where they're like, okay, I've left my body again. And then it's like, okay, let's start over. What does that feel like? What does it feel to come a little bit more into your body? What does that feel like? And part of this that I think is so useful is when you are intimate with the sensations of disassociation, it's not this like weird thing you're trying to avoid anymore. It's just this strategy you use and you're like, oh, I felt that I disassociated and I'm not scared of that. And now I know how to drop back in a little bit. And then this is kind of like a tangent, but in psychic development, one of the advantages of being able to go out of your body and back into it is you can get reads on things from outside of your body. So the read of something when you're outside of your body is different than the read in your body. And what people tend to find once they become comfortable running more energy through their body, they actually like going out of their body as a tool to look at something and then they come back in. So it's this like our strategies can also become our allies as long as we're not making them bad and we're working, because I know you understand this. As soon as something is given acceptance, now it has the space to transform. So as soon as someone can go, it's okay that I'm disassociated. The goal is not all of my energy in my body all the time, the first time I hear about it. It's okay that this is happening. Now they can actually start to bring some of their energy into their body. So that's a really simple kind of like, if you notice you're doing this all the time, I think that's a great place to start. And I think that place very naturally leads you to modalities and tools and practices that you find are helping you run more energy through your body. Because I know for me, if I hadn't been accepting of how disassociated I was, I never would have found bottom-up therapies, because I would have just been like punishing myself and thinking something was wrong with me and trying to figure out a way to fix it. But because I was like, this is just what's happening and I want a better way, I know that's why all these things just kind of started populating in my reality, where I was like, this is the better way that I was hoping for.
Wow. Let that sink in, everyone. Like, let that sink in. I was, the entire time listening, I was like, oh my God, she gets it. Like, I'm so excited about what you just shared, because this is the core of my work as well. Just how can we move from this mentality of I need to fix something to, okay, we just acknowledge and notice the sensations and let that shift our body from the inside out, our whole system from the inside out in a very organic way. To give you a more tangible example, I used to do a lot of breathing techniques, especially like coherent breathing. And it's always about like controlling your breath in order to change your breath. And I would say there is a certain time and space for that, just to like train your diaphragm and to like make that muscle stronger. But what I've really come to love is just like noticing your breath without the urge, like without changing it, almost like tracing, caressing your breath as it goes in and out with the particular quality that it has at the current moment. And that this acknowledgement allows for the system to adjust and organically change. And this is a whole different approach than us going in and being like, okay, let's drill a hole and then change this and then fix this and fix this. And yeah, just so much yes to all that you said.
Beautiful.
So, yeah, what else? What else can we explore? I really, again, love this one. What's currently present for you, Pilar?
Just anything?
Just anything. Okay.
Like anything. Okay. I think that what we're broaching here, and more so this just collaboration with ourselves, our whole systems. It's funny because I like to think that at a certain point, we were just kind of drawn to this because we were, and there wasn't like a real big sense of urgency or importance, and it was just kind of like, we're drawn to this. But something I've been noticing in the last 4 years, but it's only increasing, is that what we're kind of dancing around here, this is becoming non-negotiable to being able to exist on the planet and not be in a constant state of suffering. It's really interesting to notice how my tools and how I engage life, I wake up and I'm like, these are non-negotiables. Because when I am saying hello to what's going on in the world, I can't be in that if I'm not utilizing these, because there's such an intensity and there's such an amplification of people's pain. So that's just something I was kind of noticing as we were talking, because this is all becoming not important in a force way, but important in a like, how do we, okay, the thing that's been like, I've been working with is, how do we stay well resourced amidst the world burning? And is that okay and allowed? I say yes. I say that's okay, that's allowed. And then I say, and that's actually really important, to prioritize staying well resourced as both an inner and an outer experience as the world is burning.
What do you mean by well resourced? Just to dive into that a bit more in practical terms. Because I personally love the term like resourced, and it's something that my whole mentorship program is sort of, my whole work is centered around more of a resourced approach than diving into like shadow work and stuff like that.
What do I mean by that? So many things, but I think Okay, so I'll start with this point because I think this is one of the easier access points. We are a fountain of resource. We are fountains of life force energy. Our systems are, you might not experience yourself as that. I certainly haven't for most of my life. But I've had undeniable experiences that I am a fountain of life force, and that life force is connected from everything to my skin, to my blood and my bones, to my nervous system, to all the layers of my aura. And then at a certain point, it becomes undeniable that part of what makes me a fountain of resource is my interconnection with all these other points of resource, like you and the sun and animals and plants and music and creation, and these are all points of resource. Now, one of the ways that I perceive, I guess I'll call it trauma, but trauma to me is one word for like one plane of something. And I think if you look at other planes, trauma can also be congealed energy that's forming the body. Trauma can also be a form of self-talk that you've taken on that now just kind of loops through your head. Trauma can also be a cord you have with one of your parents that's keeping you sick. It can manifest as all these different things. Those, when that is pervasive through the system, we do not experience ourselves as fountains of resource. We experience ourselves often as having very little resource, very little energy to work with. And I think that so much of what people are experiencing right now is the planet is shifting. Lots of stuff is being brought up. Lots and lots of stuff is being brought up. And a lot of people are just moving into their kind of tried and true strategies to avoid the pain that's coming up because it's so intense, because there's so much. And when I interact with someone who's living not entirely from strategies, but from a lot of different strategies, one of the first things I always notice is they are so easily depleted by anything and everything. They do not experience themselves as something that like creates and sustains life. They do not have the energy maybe even to listen to something. So what does it mean to be well-resourced? I think that the modern kind of strategy we've been shown is that resource comes from things outside of us. So from things we do that maybe help us placate something or feel better. Like, oh, if I can just go on vacation, then I'll finally feel better. Once I go to nature, then I'll finally feel better. Once I do this, then I can finally relax. And there's like this really interesting dichotomy people have of like, when I'm doing this, I can't relax. But then when I do this, there will be this relief from all tension. But I think you and I both know that relief from all tension never comes. That's an illusion. So to be well-resourced is what allows you to engage with the tensions and the difficulties and the contrast of life. But it also takes work. It takes work. Yeah, that was like a million different kind of points. Is that good?
I take it.
Yeah.
I want to dive into something that I see in your work as sort of a foundation, which is cultivating like self-intimacy and intimacy with life. And I'm just gonna be a bit more edgy and throw in the term that I see you sometimes using interchangeably, the term God, and also interchangeably with life. And I'm just gonna leave this with you and say like, what to you, because I use this term as well often, like self-intimacy, what does that mean to you? And and intimacy with life just in general, because I see that as like the foundation. And just one more thing in that regards, because to me, that is the foundation that we are missing a lot. And with that comes like the term attunement and just, yeah, there's so much to be said, but I leave it with you for now.
You know, you are someone to me who really gets this. And it's funny because to even say like gets it is paradoxical, because at a certain point you move beyond getting it to where you don't get it at all. But to me, that is like the updated kind of template of what it means to be a mystic. And I really, really feel that from you. Oh gosh. So this is another really interesting one that a lot of people relate to through extremes. And it makes sense why there's that extreme relating, because we know extremes are a byproduct of something. It's a reaction to something. It's not the way energy naturally flows. It's now there's a contortion and a manipulation in the energy to try and create a sense of something, safety, belonging, trust, whatever. So there's this line from a song that like just rang in my head as you were talking. I think it's if I want to know God, I must know myself. If I want to see God, I must see myself. And it also reminds me of, I think it's the Rumi one where it's, I searched for God and only found myself. I searched for myself and only found God.
Yeah.
These, to me, are encapsulating something that is actually a lot more complex and nuanced. Like all good mystical poetry, they're encapsulating something that's actually really complex and simultaneously simple in experience. So, okay, what do I mean by extremes and intimacy, etc.? I think that, and this is in our world, like the realms we work in, but you also see this in the wider world, where if you look at the pole of how people are often relating to this, especially in the worlds we're in, and there's all these kind of shades in between. It's never just black and white like this, but I like to use it as an example. There's this idea that you are the creator of your reality, and that you're running the show. And sure, there might be like a folding in of, and you're co-creating with God. But often the energy that I see run behind that, I'm the sole creator of my reality, is an extreme aura. There's this extreme kind of like a cutting off of all the other things that are also co-creating your reality, that are not just your thoughts and are not just your beliefs. So that's one end. And then on this other end, and I know this one very well, there's it's all God. I submit, none of me, it's all God. Like, no me anymore. No me, just God. And I think that these are both reflections of where we've been, and I also think they're reactions to things that we've experienced. So I think that they intersect with past timelines. It's all God, no me. For a long time, being a mystic was about a complete transcendence of the personality, the body, emotions, tension, all of it. To literally just hang out at that state of I am one with all that is. So I totally get why we all fall into that. I also think too, like I said, that these states can match with things we've been through, and they can promise a relief from the pain of what we've been through. So if we've been working really, really hard to try to get our reality the way we want it, or we've been really trying to manifest, or we've been really trying to create our reality, and that's been driven by a lot of pain that's then causing us to want to control. If I come across this idea that I just have to give it all to God, that sounds really nice. That sounds like I can finally quit my full-time manifesting job and just like relax. So I totally get, like I totally get this spectrum. And what I have found, which to me is more of like a middle way, is it's not about trying to, we do create our reality. We don't control it. Our minds are not the only thing creating it. And one of the like, okay, how do I explain this? One of the best possible ways to meet up with God, life, love, all that is, in a way where you're then able to fold in and allow that connection to amplify your connection to your humanity. One of the best ways to do that that I've found is you engage what life is presenting you with, and you engage yourself as you are, not as you think you should be, not trying to control life into what you think it should be. And when you're willing to engage your humanity in that way, which is like so much of what we've talked about, like what's going on in your body, what's going on with disassociation, why does this happen every time you do that? When you start to really engage those more personal levels of reality, that's where you experience an intimacy with yourself and life as both separate and the same thing, and then all the ranges in between. And what I've found is I used to look for God in everything but what life was serving me. I was like, this annoying thing is happening, I'm going to go meditate. Like, this annoying thing is happening, I'm going to go I'm going to go disassociate and talk to my guides. Like whatever it is, this difficult thing is happening, I'm going to go do my spiritual practice, whatever it was. When God was waiting for me in exactly what life was presenting me with. And the connection I feel through that is not something I have to transcend. It's not something I have to go into an altered state to experience. It's very profound and healing, but it only further motivates me and drives me to become more human. And I think the greatest mystics, at least the ones we know, were trying to explain this to us when they would not stop talking about how divinity and humanity are not separate things. You don't have to leave divinity to experience humanity. You don't have to put divinity in a box to be doing the human stuff over here. The divine is not just reserved for this like miraculous state that you experience once every few months. So it's like, if I'm not able to be intimate with myself as I find myself, which has to include my tensions and my complexities and my contradictions and things I don't love to find, things I don't necessarily like, if I can't be intimate with that, how would I be able to be intimate with all that is?
Mm-hmm. There was so much beauty in what you shared, and I agree with everything. Like, wow. Okay, just to emphasize on what you said with like divinity and humanity coming together, I'm all about this. We are speaking on the Holy Human podcast. Um, a quote from one of my absolute favorite mystics, Meister Eckhart, I'm paraphrasing here, is something along the lines of spirituality is not to be found by flight from the world, but we must penetrate the mundane world and find God there. Very paraphrased here, but you get the essence. It's really about us penetrating sort of the mundane world and finding God in the humanness of it all, in the chaos, in just like being all over the place, being just human. And something that I'm curious about, like your take on it, is so engaging with life as it is presented in front of us. That's something that you're teaching, right? How do you like? This is something that I'm also like passionate exploring with my clients as well. Is so there's something that is happening in your life and you're presented with it, and then you want to engage with it, and then there's also the like hardcore shadow workers like myself in the past who just like dive into this and force themselves into this experience. It's almost like a fight response where you're like, okay, so I have this issue, I have this shadow, I have this aspect that I don't like. Let's feel it through. Let's feel through it. But you're engaging with a sort of fight energy into it. The other way, like the opposite, would be, okay, there's something that life presents me, and you're like collapsing or you're running away from it. And so there is this sweet spot where your system has the right amount of capacity to be able to engage with it and then process it and integrate it and make it sort of like all the fragments that you were experiencing become whole. And so, yeah, I'm just curious on your take on like how do you develop that capacity like when do you know how to engage?
Yeah, I I I love this inquiry, and I'm gonna speak to how I tend to approach it, but I want to include here that you're you're doing the same thing I'm doing, just using different words and probably a framework that intersects with mine, but is not exactly the same. Because there is no perfect script. We just find tools and frameworks that help us understand and actually experience true engagement. Because I something that's so beautiful is like there's there's so many access points to something. So the easiest one for me has always been through an understanding and an ability to see how energy is moving through someone's system. So, and this only amplified when I started to understand the nervous system more because everything is the xylophone. So I was like, oh my God, that is when this happens, and this is when that happens. So when something happens and it triggers us, and I say that in quotes because I don't think now that that word has become popular, we all have shared understandings of what it means. So I think like we've kind of lost the plot with the word trigger. Like it means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. So when something happens that brings up energy in our body nervous system aura that has been kind of dormant and more congealed. So let's just call it pain. When something happens that brings up old pain that is matching with what's happening but is not correlated 100% to what's happening. When that experience happens, and then we're sort of flooded with sensation, and then usually the next thing is strategy. So like fight, flight, freeze, fawn, transcendence, collapse, whatever, everyone has their different like strategy cocktail for an experience. So here's how I perceive that from a like, I guess I'll just call it like an auric level or from an energetic level. When that original thing happened in this lifetime, and potentially it was happening before this lifetime, the first time that there was a painful experience, and this could be, we're pre-verbal, we might not have a conscious memory of this. The first time that happens, the intelligence of our system goes, this is not something we can process. We're going to go into this strategy as a way to not have to experience the pain and the impact of what's happening fully, and as a way to make it through. And so when we do that, that the energy of the experience, the emotions, the meaning, the story, it compresses down and it drops down and starts to form our body. But there's another interesting thing that happens when we go into a strategy. Because often, once we've moved into a strategy, that creates an aura of resistance. And the really interesting thing about resistance is that what you resist, you become. So what I mean by that is whether you are collapsing, pushing, disassociating, something is happening in the aura where a space has now opened up where you're actually probably taking on energies that don't belong to you. So you're not only experiencing, you're not only feeling the impact of the pain and then kind of moving away to not have to feel that impact, but it's like now let's use fawning. When you're fawning, there's this like, okay, I'm gonna alter myself to whatever is gonna keep me safe so that I can make it through this situation. And in order to do that, I need to very accurately track what's going on with the person or the situation who's causing the harm. And in order to track from that state of resistance, I have to open up parts of my aura and start pulling parts of your energy in order to get that read. And we're not conscious this is happening. We're not like, okay, I'm going to enmesh with this person. I'm going to take on some of their pain. We're not consciously aware of any of this. This is just what's going on in our system. Okay, so cut to present day, you're an adult, you keep running into this situation that overwhelms you with pain. One of the greatest things I ever discovered was, what if we fold in? So what if we know that's happening? And this is where I've kind of come to with this. 99% of the time, if someone is super overwhelmed by an experience and they feel like, I don't have the capacity to process this, that overwhelm is correlating to some of this energy doesn't actually belong to you. Some of it is actually not yours to process. So it doesn't really matter how you go about this, because I've watched different practitioners do this in different ways. It might be as simple as you help someone down regulate, and in that down regulation, they don't even realize it, there's a dumping of the energy that doesn't belong to them, of their mom's pain, of their dad's anger, of the world's sadness. And what I've discovered with the way energy works is, once you have a better read on what's yours, you might not like it, but you always have the space for it. So I'm going to be overwhelmed every time I get angry if I'm also filled up with 10 other people's anger, which I usually am. I usually find a bunch of other people's anger, and it's why I get so overwhelmed by it. But once I'm able to release what's not mine, and I've seen this time and time again, the person goes, and then that's that point where the person has the capacity to engage what's theirs. I think that the lack of awareness that we actually take on other people's energies inadvertently when we are in a strategic response has made it so that we're now going about healing in a very extreme way. Because when you're full of a bunch of other people's energies, your responses and reactions are going to be very extreme. And then you're going to think you need very extreme things to help you work through that extreme experience. When healing is not extreme, us as nature, what belongs to us is not extreme. We have the perfect capacity to engage what's ours. But what is extreme is being filled with lots of other people's emotions, pains, stories, pictures, and not realizing it and thinking, this is all my anger. Now I need to find something really extreme to get rid of this.
Wow. Again, another wow. This is genius, Pilar. Okay. So, what I love about this, is it even an approach? It's like a framework that you're using that's very unique to you.
Yes.
What I specifically love about this is it emphasizes our unique wholeness. There's nothing wrong with us. It's just because of a leak in our energy field, in our aura, we take on other people's energy, and that doesn't mean that's something wrong with us. It's just it's a leak, and so something hooks in, comes in, attaches, and so what we all we have to do is just release that. And it's to me, it has the quality of what I'm so passionate about in somatics, as well as this one moment, it's like a glimmer, it's like this exhale. It's not that you're processing something extreme with a heavy, intense release breathwork session. That's not what releasing is to me. It's more like, wow, and now you can just let go of what doesn't belong to you. I use different terms, and I've never framed it that way, but I find it genius. I think this is really helpful for many people. And so,
Oh,
yeah,
go ahead.
Go ahead, Pilar.
I was going to fold in, I didn't make this up. Like, I didn't. Here's what happened. I was studying energy. I've been studying energy work for a really long time. And there's the common thing in energy work: release what doesn't belong to you. You always hear that: release what doesn't belong to you. It wasn't until I started to understand the way trauma works from a body nervous system level that I made the connection of, this is how other energy was consistently getting in. And this is why when we are triggered and there's that flood of energy and we're overwhelmed, this is the correspondence to that. And I think that I remember, like, it's really easy for me to find gaps in things. Like, just call it having a bunch of Virgo in my chart. It's really easy for me to see where there's gaps. And I remember being younger and training in energy work. I remember watching people release what didn't belong to them, and nothing was happening because they were either so overwhelmed or they were still in the overwhelm of the reaction. And what I found is you can't release energies in that heightened overwhelmed state. Step one is actually creating some semblance of safety. And then that's when the energy that's when the energy starts to release. And this is why I'm like, you can't have like astral energy work without an understanding of the nervous system and the body. They are all pairing together. So it's like, release what doesn't belong to you actually requires a very specific setup in the system. Otherwise, we're just in that heightened state and we're like, okay, release what doesn't belong to me. But it's like, you're still in the flood of overwhelm. No, we're not trying to transform from this space. We're trying to accept this space and downregulate, and then we can start moving energy.
Yes, this is where our work intersects. Like, there's many intersection points, but this specifically, like what I do in all of my sessions, I start with, you can call it in more mystical terms like presence, like with a meditation, and specifically in somatic terms, an orientation practice. And orientation just serves for the nervous system to like register that around in this space there's no danger, because when you have time to analyze the different shades and textures in your space, it signals to your brain and your nervous system like, hey, we're fine here. And so then from there you can start engaging with whatever work. And I love this so much because it oftentimes when we hear the term releasing, it's like you said, it's this pushing out. It's like from fight response. It's like, I want to get rid of this. But that's not releasing. Like, the true releasing is more like, okay, like you called it, down regulated. Now my system has some sort of like embodied safety and stability, and from there it's like an exhale. It's just things like flow off my aura without anything that I have to like force.
Exactly. And nature mirrors to us consistently how easy it is to release from that space of stability and presence. Nature is just showing us, like, look at how easily I let go. Like, it's just a natural process of what we are. So it's like, once the system is oriented to more of its naturalness, a lot of the work starts to happen without us even trying to get it to happen.
Yeah, there we are again with like organic unfolding and just coming back to nature. And we as humans, we are a part of nature, and just realizing this is sort of one of the greatest parts that we can do on our part in this kind of work that we are doing. Wow, what a fantastic conversation. I enjoyed every second. I want to give you the opportunity here, Pilar, to sort of like check in if there's anything final that you would like to share, any final thoughts. and also like share your socials and where people can connect with you and find you. And it's going to be linked in the show notes, but just your
I
invitation.
do have final thoughts. We're dancing around something that I think we've kind of touched on it, but I think it's important to circle back to it. And because we keep kind of acknowledging that when you're in a certain state, chemical, physical, energetic, it becomes really easy to then approach healing, transformation, spirituality, insert lots of other things here, from this space of force. Like it has to happen this way, or I have to make it through this, or I have to do this to get this to happen. And this is something that I've noticed. I mean, I noticed it well before I had a business, but it became like blaringly obvious once I did. And it's that, and if I were to make it more simple and less like including all of the complexities, it's that we start to mistake our experience of ourselves in reality. We start to take the experience we have from those really heightened states, or from it being in our strategies. We start to think that that's who we are and that's how reality works. So when we're constantly in fight or flight, we start to relate to healing as something that has to happen now. I have to make it through this now. I have to heal this now. We start to relate to things from these extremes. And then maybe later when we're in collapse, we're like, all of this is bullshit. None of this works. It's never worked for me. And we start to take who we are in that state and how life feels to be how life is, and to be who we are. And I find that if we're not practicing what we just talked about, which is actually quite simple, it's just so easy to miss. If we're not practicing that, we're living lives where we're being driven by pain, and then we're trying to find ways to relieve ourselves of that pain, and then because we're not coming out of that state, it's not working the way we want it, and then we're feeling like that's just how life goes for us. And this is something I've seen this so many times in so many ways, and I think that it's going to become increasingly important to be aware of as more and more people in the world are living from that those triggered states more predominantly. It's almost like, I'm sure you can feel this. I wake up and it's very apparent to me how easy it would be to collapse into fear. Mm-hmm. I feel a lot of the world there, and I feel the draw of like, I could just let some of this into I could watch a news clip, I could go listen, and then I know I'd just be right there with the rest of the world, collapsed in that fear or driven by that fear. Then you look at how most of the world is there, most decisions are being made from there, most ideas are coming from that place, and you start to see the whole world is being built on this fear. These driving energies are building our world. And that's like a macro version of what I was just talking about, where I watch a lot of people and I'm like, we need to throw away everything you've experienced in healing and spirituality and transformation. We need to like set it on a shelf, and we need to start very simply and at like the baseline of just learning how to orient to yourself and what is, and then flow from there. Because it gets to a point with people where it's like all this information, all these words, all these tools, all these teachers, they're not helping. They're only adding to the overwhelm and then the feeling that you need to fix or heal something, because then you finally won't feel this tension. When I think the real game we're playing is not how do we eradicate all tension. It's how do we become better at existing among and engaging tension, specifically the tension that's a part of who we are in our lives.
Mic drop. Wow. Another wow. Okay. That was, yeah, just the perfect ending for this episode. Let's leave it here. Wow. Any, just as a final thing, just anything that you would like to share in regards to your socials and where people can find you and how they can work with you before we end this episode?
Sure. My Instagram is my name. I know it'll be linked. And when will this be coming out?
Pretty soon, like in a week or at latest like 2 weeks from now.
Okay. So the easiest and probably most substantial and long-term way to access what I'm up to is through my membership Eden. And that is the way I describe it is it's energy and self-mastery for life, and then there's a tier for business. But this conversation really beautifully exemplified a huge facet of what's taught and practiced in there. I think people, again, energy mastery has become a very common term. We don't all have shared definitions of what it means. I don't really have a term that encompasses what I'm up to, but what I'm aiming to do with my work, in all of my work, but if I'm talking about it in the container of Eden, is create a space to practice what we're talking about through and to be like weaving in all of our bodies. So for some people, they're in there and they're like, wow, I'm not in my body. And they're like realizing that. And they're like, okay, I have the practices and the awareness to start working with this in here. And we have other people who are like, oh my God, I can feel my energy centers for the first time. I can like feel beyond my physical body. And then we have people who are like, I talk to my soul. And then I wove it into doing the dishes. But if I were to offer like how I'm kind of doing that with frameworks, what I really teach and how I facilitate is a blend of like mainly Western energy work frameworks, a lot of like trauma integration and attachment trauma work, and then like a pretty great awareness of just how to work bottom up somatically. So I'm kind of always weaving all three of those. And it's why whenever I talk about it, I always say body dash nervous system dash aura, because it's more than that, and you know that, but it's we're collaborating with all three all the time in there. So that's like, that is it's the most what's the word? Eden is the most substantial thing I've ever been able to bring through and have stewarded, and it's also, not surprisingly, the easiest thing I've ever done. It has been, and I mean ease in a sense of how it flows, and how I surprise myself with how resourced I am to steward something that has no end date, because I didn't even know I was that resourced. It was kind of confronting to me of like, I'm going to start this thing and it never ends. But lo and behold, that has actually like juiced me up and opened up like this whole new aspect of my creativity and my work. So that's where I would go if you want to go beyond just what's being offered for free and to the public.
Eden, your membership, and also for the people listening right now, there's plenty of other podcast episodes that you're featured in, Pilar, and I've personally listened to like, I think like almost all of them, and they are just such amazing resources. And you have a lot of free stuff on your website as well, so that I can highly recommend. So,
yes, there is a whole page called Windows into Eden, and it doesn't include, it actually does include some practices, but it's a way for people to watch some classes and do some guided practices and just kind of get a little taste of like, this is what it's like. It's also just a great resource for people who are like, I just want some stuff.
right. Okay. Let's leave it at that, Pilar. Thank you so much for coming on to this episode, speaking here. And yeah.
Thank you so much for having me. This was incredible. I had very, very high expectations because of who you are, and it like completely met them and superseded them.
This is the end of today's episode with Pilar Lesko. Thank you for being here, for tuning in, and for journeying with us. Hopefully it served you well. I'd greatly appreciate if you leave an honest review or subscribe to my YouTube channel. Also, if you're interested in working with me, I'm currently offering a 3-month one-on-one mentoring program called the Rose and Sword Mentorship. The focus of this one-on-one container is really on everything that we talked about in today's episode. Specifically though, helping you to feel safe in your body by building your nervous system capacity and cultivate a more intimate relationship with life and God. Should this speak to you, my invitation is to explore my website, felixwhitman.com. There's a lot to read there, also some free resources, or you could schedule a free call with me via the link you find down below in the show notes. And with that, my friend, Felix checking out. Hopefully seeing you in the next episode. Have a wonderful day.